I don't know if you've ever wondered whether priests like being priests, but I can tell you for myself that I love being a priest. I love being a priest. I've only been a priest for a year and a half, and I'd be lying to you if I tell you that every day is like super easy and super exciting. No, some days are difficult, but I love being a priest, and I would not change it for the world. I love being a spiritual father, walking with others, walking with you. I just try to follow Christ as you strive to make your way back to heaven. I love being the instrument of God the Father's mercy in the confessional as He bestows His pardon and love upon His children. And I love feeding the church, feeding you, with the greatest food we get to taste on this side of eternity, with the Eucharist. But truth be told, I didn't always feel like this about the priesthood, before I was a priest. God first began to call me to the priesthood when I was pretty young. I was 6 or 7, when God began to put a little idea in my heart and my mind about the possibility of being a priest, and at that time I was like, okay, who knows? I don't know. But then the call started getting stronger. When I was about 14, I went to a retreat, and somebody invited us to ask God, hey God, what do you want for my life? And so I took up the challenge and I asked God, and I did not like what I started to sense, because I began to sense that perhaps He was inviting me to be a priest. And instead of being excited, I was terrified. And so I tried to run away from it multiple times all throughout high school, throughout college. I was running away from it because I was terrified. Spoiler alert though, God won. And I am so glad that He did. I'm so glad that He did. One of the things that I think I've learned through just my own vocation story, and also just in my spiritual life, is that God always knows best. God always knows best. He is so trustworthy. He loves you deeply, and He loves me. We're His children. And so He's never going to ask something of us or invite us to something that is not good for us. He wants our best because He loves us. He's the trustworthy one. And so God always knows best. If there was a question, should I trust God? Yes. You should always trust the Lord. He knows best. So we could ask ourselves, do we believe this? Do I believe that God always knows best? Do I trust Him? Do I see Him as a trustworthy one? In general, just in everything the Lord may be asking us, and then maybe today in particular, regarding our vocation. I am confident that the Lord is calling men from this parish to be priests. He's calling men from St. Elizabeth Catholic Church in Pflugerville, Texas, to be priests. Might God be calling you to be a priest, to serve the church, to bring the sacraments to His people? And if so, if the Lord might be calling you, do you trust Him? That He wants the best for you, that He loves you, and that He would not call you to something that wouldn't fulfill you. I am also confident that the Lord is calling women from this parish to be religious sisters, religious nuns. Might the Lord be calling you to be completely His, to belong to Him alone? And if so, if the Lord might be calling you, do you trust Him that He loves you and that He will satisfy the deepest longings of your heart if He so calls you? If you're a parent, and especially a parent of children that still haven't figured out their vocation, that's also a question for you to ask yourself, do I trust God's plans for my children? That He knows best regarding their future and their vocation, as opposed to my own desires for my children. Sometimes perhaps we have just in our mind what we want our children to do when they're older. Maybe we really want them to be priests and religious sisters. Maybe that's not the Lord's will for them. Or the other way around. Maybe the Lord wants them to be a priest or a religious sister, and that's not what we want in our heart. So can we relinquish our own desires for our children and say, Lord, what is your will for my children? Can I help my children, invite them to ask that question of you, Lord? To invite them to say, hey, you should ask the Lord, what does He want for you? And then help them listen to God's voice to whatever He may be calling them, whether it's marriage, whether it's a consecrated life, priesthood, a life of being single and committed to service, right? But can we trust that it is the Lord, it is God who knows best and not ourselves? That are beautiful in the gospel, just the call of Peter and Andrew and James and John, especially for me moving, it is how they reply to the Lord, right? The Lord comes, invites Simon or Peter and Andrew, and He says, come after me, and I'll make you fishers of men. At once, they left their nets and followed Him. At once, they just heard the call. They saw it with clarity. The Lord is inviting me to this. And they left their nets at once and followed Him. And same with James and John, right? They were in a boat with their father, mending their nets. And He called them. And immediately, says the gospel, they left their boat and their father and followed Him. They knew what the Lord was inviting them to. They trusted Him and they followed Him. I want to encourage you that you not be afraid to trust the Lord. Whether it's in the topic of vocational calling or just in general, whatever the Lord may be inviting you right now in your life, there is no need to fear the Lord. There is no need to be afraid because He is the trustworthy one. So if you know what the Lord is inviting you to, whether vocationally speaking or just something else He's inviting you to, encourage you to just be like this man in the gospel. Hear it, go ahead and drop your nets and follow Him.